Mimma, how you doing?
Hi, my dear. I'm very well. How are you?
Happy end of Paris.
Happy end of Paris and happy start of couture,
Yeah.
actually.
It never
But
ends.
one at a time.
So. So what did you think of Paris this time round?
I've been thinking about this question today, and I'm a little bit confused because it started in a way and then it went in another way. So I cannot really talk about real trends, but I can tell you what I liked and what I really disliked and what I was disappointed about.
Sure. Let's start with what you like the best.
So I've got definitely three favorites of this
Okay.
season, and they are starting from the youngs. Wales Bonner, absolutely extraordinary. Hed Mayner, everybody knows he's one of my new passions. And Dior I thought he was absolutely fantastic. Not that I not always think so, but I think him is overdoing himself every time, and I think he knows how high are now the expectation about the two next days where he's going to present his first couture for Fendi. And so he showed us what he can do. So I think he's made the expectations even higher.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's always the pressure with Dior every season, is that to me there's always something introduced that you think, oh God, that's so fantastic, or the finish on that, or the material on that, or for last season it was kind of the opera gloves or the theme or the artist. And I just think this season, working with Peter Doig, I was a bit like, that brought back art GCSE flashbacks, and not necessarily in the best way.
Oh, really?
I just but I thought the way he used Peter, and the way it was just so sumptuous and beautiful. And you're quite right in that every time the bar is set higher and higher. It's exactly, I think, what men should be aspiring to wear, if that makes sense.
Completely. To me, completely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. But I also read, it was very interesting. I didn't know that Peter Doig worked with Stephen Jones a long time ago.
I think, yeah, that mix of couture with menswear is just...
Those coats, and then we're going to talk about Wales Bonner and Head as well. But one thing that I liked in these seasons were the coats. I think designers are cold and they made beautiful outerwear, and especially Kim Jones, he did the best coats of the season, of many seasons.
I'm glad you said that, because I was just about to say the same thing. I think the outerwear was so strong this season. Obviously, it's autumn winter, so outerwear is a given. But I think
Not always.
not always. There's such a focus on outerwear, more so than knitwear this autumn winter.
Yes.
And it was almost like a bit of a pandemic. I just want to be outside. I want to wear something gorgeous. But all of them had this refinement and luxury to them that was just up on upper echelon, that everything was kind of shoved up to the upper echelons, particularly Wales Bonner. I thought their coats were spectacular.
Yeah, I mean, again, we know how good she is and how deep she is, and I like her stance on thing, her being an activist without being too political. There are hints, it's refined, and even this is the third of the trilogy of his films between, London and the Caribbean, but I think the fashion, we could talk about the film and her collaborations, and the poem by Derek Walcott, which was absolutely extraordinary. But I think we need to talk about her collections, because this one was just extraordinary. I think she is so good. Her tailoring is so mature and so important. She's really, really going places.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think what I really liked about this collection was it reminded me of Wales Bonner quite a while ago, when we were getting those kind of silk organza white suits, and it was almost so opulent you were afraid it was kind of out of everyone's reach. And then she kind of tapered into Adidas collections and something a bit more commercial, and this feels like the perfect combination of both, with those beautiful tailorings that she had before, and now we've got this. It's such a nice heady mix. And I think this season she collaborated with, is it Anderson and Shepherd from Savile Row? So
yes,
super
perfect tailoring. Yeah, very good. I think, and that's why I put her in the same discussion as Hed Mayner, because I love seeing these young designers who have incredible ideas and know about fashion a lot because they studied, they read, they're inspired, and then they manage to do tailoring, classic tailoring, in a new and modern way. I mean, there is one jacket in Hed collection, I don't remember the name, the look number, but there is this jacket with 3 buttons where he did these overflowing shoulders, completely exaggerated like he does, but then the jacket suddenly is tailored at the waist, is fitted, which is something that usually everything is very far from the body. And I thought, that's so original, that's so new, you know, I haven't seen. And so, yeah, he's another one that I think is one to watch. And his collection is so luxurious and luscious and yummy and elegant. And he's so simple, you know, they don't need to shout, they're humble, they don't copy anybody. And that's what I like. They're genuine and original.
Is there anyone else that stood out for you?
Well, these are the three ones that I'm passionate about. And I mean, there were bits and pieces of others. I liked the Namachenko show. I thought they had very strong outerwear, you know, the white mountaineering. I think I love the fact that he put the show in the snow, which is what it should be, with a very interesting film, you know. I mean, these white mountaineering and Phipps, you know, these films in nature with this glorious nature around, you know, you can see the majesty of nature, which I love.
It's what we want right now, to see that, have that in front of us.
And we need to bow to nature. Like, we've seen how the forces of the universe are stronger than we are. You know? I've
been really eager to talk to you about Virgil's Louis Vuitton.
Okay, go ahead. Because I changed my mind 5 times in the past 2 days.
So have I. So have I.
Rewatch, restudy, understand. I went from almost hate to almost love. So I want to hear you first.
I think this is definitely my favorite collection that he's done. I think this is really mature for him at Louis Vuitton. I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I think it was just looking at things through a mature lens, whereas sometimes we have kind of childlike ideas, which are beautiful, like surrealism and huge blown up scapes. And that's not to say that if we were actually physically at this Louis Vuitton show, there wouldn't be all that kind of fanfare. But for me, I felt like rather than having all of that energy and fanfare and decoration, even though the invites were airplanes, there was a real focus on who was there and what that meant, and the styling and the lack of space or the lack of fanfare around it. And actually it was more a focus on the clothes and the power of those clothes and what that means in itself. And I was like, actually, this is a bit of a progression for Virgil. I thought some of the clothes were actually gorgeous, and I loved that whole strap around the jacket, that almost kind of 80s, 70s New York long line coat and the sharp shoulders. Was a little bit lost in the kind of bright green fluffy jackets, and where it got a bit too hip hop for me. But I understand that needs to be there for the Virgil customer, if that makes sense. But I just like the dichotomy of everything together. I love the presentation, love the casting. Seeing Mos Def and Kai Isaiah Jamal was just like,
yeah, well, that was incredible.
Again, same as you, I change my mind every time I watch it, but overall I think it was a really good progression for Louis Vuitton and Virgil, and I really loved what it stood for.
Well, for me, and here's why I changed my mind several times, because for me, I mean, I was sold with Saul Williams, who I think is amazing. And he looks amazing, and he looks so elegant, you know, that first look in the mountains, the snow, whatever. The first time I watched the film, I was like, there's too much going on, you know, it's asking too much, and there's too many clothes, and the collection is too long. And even if I think that the styling by Yves Camara brought something, I think there is a big step forward, and it's not by chance, you know, that he called him. I thought, I'm going to say something that I probably will regret, but I felt some tackiness here and then, which I was totally not expecting. But then I rewatched, and then I rewatched, and then I listened, and then I understood a few things and I liked it much more. And then I decided to also look at the looks at the collection, and actually there are some outstanding pieces. And yeah, I think it's one of the best things he's done, probably the best thing he's done.
Yeah.
at Louis Vuitton for sure. Can we talk about Rick Owens?
For sure. What do you say about Rick Owens? Pan.
Well, I thought it was probably going, for my taste, a little bit too far in being so angry. You know, it's a bit too sadomaso and violent for me.
Mhm.
But then again, you know, I read 2 interviews that he gave about this show, and I'm very interested in what he says. You know, I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong, but you know, the garden in Jerusalem,
Yeah.
Gethsemane, where Jesus went before he knew he was going to get arrested and eventually killed. All of that, you know, and he says, and I read somewhere he says, because I'm in this limbo, you know, now Biden has been voted in, Trump is out, but we don't know what's going to happen, and plus the pandemic and the economy. So he says, I'm still on hold, you know, like I'm there knowing that something bad is going to happen. I'm not very positive. All of that, it's interesting. All of that, it's fine. I mean, Rick Owens as usual. But then I didn't like the looks. I didn't like the styling. And usually I do. I don't know. It was too much for me this time.
I'm half and half with you, because I loved the kind of layered cutout vests that could have been dresses, and they're almost agender loopy pieces that felt like 3-in-1 or 2-in-1.
Yeah.
But the reference to the anarchy symbol on the underwear, and just the idea of the anarchy symbol in general, I think it's too literal for someone as cerebral as Rick. And I don't necessarily need that so explicitly thrown at me. What I think Rick does when he does it well is that he's showing anger through pink lame and, you know, high-heeled boots, and that's when it works really well. Someone who did add on a little thread, thinking about people creating in lockdown rather than anger, JW for me.
JW and Louis.
JW's use of those kind of knits that he'd managed to dye in lockdown through.
That's one of my favorite pieces.
So beautiful.
That's one of my favorite pieces of the week. So Georgie, I love his attitude to all of this. You know, he sits down, he did it for Loewe as well. Then he sends amazing things to lucky journalists. But, you know, he sits down, he describes things in a very simple way. He doesn't show off. There's something about him right now that I absolutely adore. And I think it's reflected also in his collections. They're beautiful, they're you know, creative, because that's what he is. They're probably very complicated, whatever, but they appear matter of fact, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed also the ability to make you feel involved every step of the way, even if you didn't get a lovely fancy pack from the PR. There's the video, there's, you know, there's always something to dive into for everyone, which I really like. And also the fact that it feels tactile through the screen, which is something that Prada did back in Milan. But those jumpers and some of the knits for Loewe, I was like, I can feel how gorgeous and fluffy that is through the screen, and I think that's a real testament.
I like the Loewe collaboration. I mean, revisiting the estate of what's his name, Joe Brainard. That was interesting, and there's some pieces were outstanding. There were some things for me that were a little bit too much, like, you know, the layered sweatshirts or t-shirts, but you know, that's okay. You know, it's
I quite like those actually. For me, I think what Loewe did really cleverly is introduce that into the homeware, with pull the artist collaboration into pillows, because from a commercial standpoint, I mean, I'm not even that big of a fan of the pillows, but I was like, oh, I need some pillows, maybe I can have a look.
I need to say something that I haven't read or heard from anybody, but maybe you tell me you're crazy. But all the hype about Casablanca, I never really understood, you know, just because you're finalist twice, not really my cup of tea. But their film, I think it's a bad copy of Gucci.
Do you think?
So much. I mean, there are not references, there are the styling, the hair, the atmosphere, but then instead of being cool people living, you know, in an era of Rome, they are in the best hotel of Monte Carlo. So there's the glam and the, you know, the richness of it. But yeah, I was watching that film and saying, why isn't everybody saying it?
Like Casablanca, but it's not something I naturally gravitate towards. But I'm interested in it because there's so much buzz about it. Yeah, the film I thought was good and like works really well with the brand. The whole theme of kind of Monaco and splash cash is quite Casablanca, and I think that's what differs it from Gucci. I do see the similarities, so there are parallels for sure, but I think Casablanca for me is slightly more and I don't mean this in a bad way, but slightly more gaudy. If Gucci's kind of like the earthier counterpart, Casablanca's kind of the color tones they pick are slightly more.
I don't say the collection was a copy of Gucci.
But the film.
You know, remember the first films on the roof of the building with many people partying and with the weird animals and some vintage glamorous hair pieces. And no, because then if you look at the collection, I thought there were some nice things, but I thought the references to the casinos were too literal. I think it's a lot of hype. It's much ado about nothing, I think. But I mean, I might be completely wrong. So
speaking of hype, I think Vetements was a little bit of a step away from, I don't know, I look at Vetements and I think this is so similar to Balenciaga in some ways, and some ways I'm like, this isn't growing enough for me. And I understand it's super, super popular, but it's just too rinse and repeat for me. Some of the dresses and the boots were really lovely, but they're iterations of something we've seen already.
Well, I think they're a bit in trouble, you know. I think Demna was the creative machine there, and I think that Vetements deserves more because they brought up a little bit their greatest hits. There was a lot of Balenciaga, but you know, it's Demna. That's what they are, Vetements, you know, their clothes, and there was a little bit of styling, and I don't know.
I think you're quite right, but I also think this is the perfect opportunity. Vetements thrives because it riffs off what's going on in the world, be that street style or political, or
they need a designer.
There's so much going on that they could be riffing off. There's so many fantastic.
They need a creative director. They need to hire someone who then gives it a stamp, you know. But I don't want to trash them because they don't deserve it. You know, they can still make it. And Vetements, it meant a lot for young people approaching fashion, and it's too young to die. That's what I mean. And I was watching it and feeling tenderness, and I loved it much more than Casablanca, personally.
I agree with you there. Just before we go, overall Paris Fashion Week, how have you felt? Because I feel like last time we were discussing Paris, we were a little bit underwhelmed or a little bit, you know, excited because everyone was showing how they presented in the digital sphere. But now that we've got that behind us and we're moving through, how do you think Paris Fashion Week feels this time round, particularly in the digital sense?
It's funny, I haven't really thought about that because I think we're getting used. It's actually the third season. Paris is the second maybe, but we had maybe the third. And I don't know, it's like time has stopped. You know, people have their own, they have developed a style of presenting. And so their style of presenting, the style of film or the style of, you know, some do a show that it's film, some do a film that it's like fashion film with a narration. I think it's become part of their brands, like, you know, what JW does with these two brands. We expect that. So I'm not overwhelmed or underwhelmed. I didn't have any surprises, if that it's an opinion. I wasn't surprised by anything.
Yeah, I'm quite pleased with how it's going, I must say. I think it looks, I feel like last time we were talking, there was quite a few, not disappointments, but we were waiting to be wowed in presentation format. And I feel like everyone's kind of hit their stride this season. We know what everyone's doing. Exactly. Yeah. It was quite a good week, I think.
It was quite a good week. Yeah, it was quite a good week. I liked it, you know, because sometimes when you want to do things like what we're doing and you want to say things that are relevant, but then you have to remember so many things, it becomes overwhelming. This is just the right quantity.
Yes, the Goldilocks of Paris Fashion Week.
Exactly. Always lovely to talk to you.
Lovely to speak to you, Mimma. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Bye.